Isaac Manor stood in front of the gate after 5 years in prison. As he peeked out, he noticed the waiting admissions committee, his ex-wife, his ex-daughter, her father, mother, and brother. Isaac turned to the guard and inquired, "Sir, is there another way out of here? I don't want to sprint through the slum." He nodded to the little crowd in front of the gate. "Don't you want to visit your family?" A guard questioned, surprised. "I don't have any family anymore. They've all deceived me. And there's still the restraining order which I'm not sure if is still in effect." The guard briefly considered how helpful and friendly this prisoner had always been. He called out, informed the gatekeeper that he would be utilizing the emergency exit and told Isaac, "This way." The guard guided Isaac through a maze of passageways until they reached a small steel door. The guard unlocked it and escorted Isaac outdoors around 2:30. Lydia, Isaac's ex-wife, checked her watch and asked her father. "He was meant to be freed at 2, right?" Her father nodded affirmatively. Lydia approached the gate and asked the guard at the lodge what time Isaac Manor would arrive. The guard reviewed the log and responded. "He was freed through the rear door half an hour ago at his request." Lydia shed tears. "Outside the back door, why?" "We came to welcome him back. I know he's angry with us, but are you really so angry? He has nobody else. Have you got an address?" "I can't tell you his address, ma'am. He asked me not to tell anyone, and I overheard him speaking with the sergeant." "Did he also mention that he had a restraining order against him? Do you want him back in jail after everything he's been through?" Lydia became white. "A restraining order? Crap. I completely forgot about that." Meanwhile, Isaac walked briskly to the bus station, pondering on the last 6 years. He had plans for where he was going and who he was meant to meet. Isaac had been a happy guy 6 years ago, married to Lydia for 18 years and madly in love with his 16-year-old daughter, whom he named Tommy, short for Thomas after her grandmother. He was 40 years old at the time and worked as a software engineer. He could create his own computer programs and enjoy making self-learning robots as a hobby. He was also working on his discipline project, which involved rewiring and reprogramming the security system as well as adding an independent backup. It had a covert communication link to a remote server and a hidden server hard drive. Solar panels on the roof provided an independent power source for the entire system. On a whim, he created another secret system in his garden with a 4 petabyte backup. Outside the garden perimeter but still on his property. To make matters worse, he devised a dual-camera system concealed behind a ceiling-mounted sound system. Isaac needed a good security system because his one-man company did a lot of work for the government, and he was glad to work on this project. His house, large enough for a family, was at the end of a cul-de-sac in Dens, together with 4 other houses on the plot behind it. He created a vast office while yet leaving enough space for a beautiful garden. He purchased the property and built a house adjoining a forest reserve with the proceeds from the establishment of an internet search engine for software solutions when he was 20 years old. He created it and released it on the internet, where one of the software behemoths instantly purchased it for use on their website. Isaac was an average man, 6 feet 2 inches, weighing 190 pounds, with dark blonde hair and bright brown eyes, a kind face with large lips and a beard that he had to shave off in the evenings to seem respectable. He enjoyed biking and strolling, but disliked strenuous physical activity. Isaac was shy at first, but once he opened up, he became a loving, charming and humorous person who could converse on a wide range of issues. He was also an ardent reader, able to read anything quickly and recall articles and sections from books years later. This came in helpful for his profession. 6 years ago, local Sheriff Peter Ramsey requested him to upgrade the program. To reduce pollution, traffic lights and intense traffic needed to be controlled more efficiently. That's when everything went bad for him. Isaac and Lydia invited the sheriff to supper to discuss the status of the project. When the sheriff met Lydia, he instantly began fantasizing about a statuesque woman. It took Ramsey 6 months to realize his dream. Late one morning, Isaac completed the road project and returned home to celebrate by taking his wife out to dinner in their driveway. He spotted an unknown automobile, guests. He believed he entered the house and saw Lydia and the sheriff. "What's going on here?" he shouted. The sheriff stopped and grinned at Isaac. Then he spoke mockingly to Lydia. "The little one has learned, now I'll leave you two alone to give him the rules." Lydia appeared slightly uncomfortable, but nodded in agreement as the sheriff walked out of the house, closing the door behind him. Lydia questioned Isaac. "Can we talk about this as adults?" Isaac's shock and anguish faded, giving place to a cold, calculated anger. "I want you out of the house. Pack your belongings and leave." "No. You allowed me to have one affair. It will not last long. It will be over soon. If you don't, you will bear the penalties, and you will not like them. If you file for divorce, I will take everything from you, and you won't see Tommy again. You are delusional. You can't possibly expect me to agree to it." "You are out of your mind," Lydia sighed. "I was scared you'd react like this. I love you, but I need it, and it'll pass. Do not do this to yourself." Isaac answered with cold calm. "Are you the one who is threatening me? You should be aware that I do not respond well to threats. I'm leaving now, and will return at 6 this evening. In the meantime, your sweetheart is free to entertain you as he wishes. I will never touch you again. But when I return, you'd better leave." Lydia opened her mouth, but then decided to lower her head and walk out the bedroom door. 5 minutes later, Isaac was back in the car, and on the phone with his lawyer to schedule an appointment. Isaac arrived home in the evening to an empty house, and his rage gave way to despair and grief. The next morning at 8 a.m., Isaac's attorney entered his home office. Ben, Green, and Isaac were good friends, so they could easily schedule a meeting before the start of the work week. Isaac laid down the coffee pot and inquired. "Coffee?" "Yes. With a little water, the color becomes black. The nail polish remover you serve as coffee is extremely unpleasant on my stomach. So what is the problem you need to tackle so quickly?" Isaac told him about capturing Sheriff Peter Ram on his date with Lydia, as well as Lydia's threats. Ben appeared surprised and scared. "Peter Ramsey. What the heck? That is horrible news. Isaac's corrupt is a rotting corpse, yet no one can prove it. He brought Lydia into this, and he always has other ideas. You must defend yourself financially and possibly physically." Isaac's brain surged in with newfound vigor. His power was not easily intimidated, so he devised a quick and filthy remedy. "I will grant you power of attorney. You can print the required paperwork here, and I will sign them straight away. If something goes wrong, you can manage my finances. I will give you a flash disk, with all the information you require, and you should begin the divorce proceedings." Ben nodded. And just as I was going to depart at 930, there was a big bang and the door fell inward. 5 police officers raced inside and knocked both males to the ground. "Which one of you was Isaac Minar?" one of them shouted. Isaac, lying face down, said into the carpet that he was the guy they desired. "You've been arrested," said the officer. "For what?" Isaac inquired, perplexed, "as if you were unaware. Your wife and daughter have filed abuse reports. They're being examined right now. I assaulted Lydia and Tommy." "No way. I haven't touched or seen my daughter since yesterday morning." Ben intervened. "Isaac, keep your mouth closed. Do not say anything. I will manage it." He turned to the police and inquired. Where are you taking him to 2nd Street? The reply arrived. Take care, Isaac. Don't be tricked. Also, don't mention anything without my present. Ben called out as Isaac was put into the back seat of the police car, then dashed to his office to lock the flash drive in the safe. He informed his fiancée, Anna, who was also his secretary, that Isaac had gotten into a fight with Sheriff Day and was detained for attacking Lydia and Tommy. He ran to the 2nd Street station. When he arrived, he announced himself as Isaac's attorney and the officer on duty directed him to wait. An hour later, the officer informed him abruptly that Mr. Manar had been relocated to the Forest Lane station. And chilly lump formed in Ben's stomach. He had the impression that Ramsdale was attempting to keep him away from Isaac in order to buy more time to force a confession. So he dashed over to Forest Lane at the counter. He informed the officer on duty that he had come for Mr. Manor, and the waiting game resumed when the duty officer stated that Isaac was not present. But at the 2nd Street station, Ben had had enough. He took out his cell phone, browsed through his contacts, and hit fast dial on the friendly judge's number. He told the judge what had happened, who was involved, and how they were defrauding him. The court instructed Ben to place him on speakerphone. He questioned Mr. Green in a clear voice, "Is the officer on duty in the vicinity?" "Yes, sir." The officer is now listening to his supervisor. "Good. Gentlemen, this is Judge Orlando speaking. It appears that the cops are blocking Mr. Manor's attorney from speaking with his client. Is this correct? 3 broadcasts before noon is a tad excessive." "No, sir. It's simply a clerical error. Manor is located on 2nd Street. The cop stammered while thinking, "Oh darn, Sheriff Ramsdale can kiss my buttocks. Next time. I am not going to take that judge's anger on myself." When Mr. Green arrives at 2nd Street, he will have immediate access to Mr. O. Manor. Understand? Mr. Green will be able to communicate with an uninjured Mr. Manor as soon as he enters the station. This means no bruising, no tumbling downstairs, no mishaps, and no interrogation without a lawyer present. Do I make it plain, gentlemen? Now for the books, please provide your names, rank, and badge numbers. Despite the air conditioning, both men sweat tremendously. From the phone discussion ended, the supervisor offered to accompany him to 2nd Street. He spotted Isaac sitting in a jail waiting for Ben. Ben retrieved a voice recorder from its case and hit the red button. "Isaac, have they attempted to interrogate you?" "Yes, they tried. They also attempted to frighten me. They threatened me with a baton if I didn't admit to assaulting and gravely hurting Lydia and Tommy. I instructed them to do what they needed to do, but I wouldn't say anything unless my lawyer was present." "Were you treated well?" "They did not treat me at all. I haven't had a drink since they brought me here, and I was not allowed to use the restroom." Then it abruptly ceased. "I was able to use the restroom and grabbed a cup of horrible tea. I'm scared something unpleasant awaits me. I apologize, Isaac. I'm also terrified of that. It's all very well thought out. Have you been transferred to another station?" "No. I have been here since my arrest. I'm going to forward your case to a colleague of mine. I'm essentially a family law attorney. I am going to manage your divorce. My colleague is far better suited to this case. Is this good with you?" "Yes, it is all right. Simply remember to use your power of attorney." 6 months later, in court, Isaac had no chance. Photographic proof was presented. Lydia and Tommy testified, along with 2 women Isaac had never heard of, who claimed Isaac was prone to violent outbursts. Isaac was unable to provide an alibi for that night since the hard disk unexpectedly crashed during the examination. He didn't want to divulge his backup system, apart from the one they'd wrecked. He may need it in the future. The prosecutor characterized him as a terrible father and even worse husband, mistreating and abusing his wife and children. Lydia and Tommy sat uneasily, glancing ahead. Isaac felt they didn't appear particularly healthy, but he didn't care. He sat stoically on the bench, waiting for the axe. The jury digested it all and convicted Isaac guilty of all charges. Finally, the judge pronounced sentence. Isaac was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison, excluding pretrial detention. With any luck, he'd be out in 3.5. But Isaac was expecting 4 or 5 because of the sheriff's tentacles. As the judge read the punishment, he heard Lydia sigh as he gazed at her. He noticed that she had turned ashy and his daughter was crying, her eyes bulging. Peter Ramsdell, back in his cell, was the only one with a Cheshire cat grin. He received a visitor. The woman's only words as she gave him a hefty envelope were, "You have been served." Isaac handed the packet to his lawyer and asked him to deliver it to Ben Green, leaving him alone. 2 weeks after his sentence ended, Isaac fell to the hard bench in despair. Ben came to see Isaac to discuss the divorce. The mail included divorce and adoption documents that needed to be signed before Tommy could be adopted by Peter Ramsey. Isaac signed them without second thought. Even though it stung like hell, then he discussed Lydia's requests with Ben. The house requires half of their savings, $5,000 per month for 5 years. There's also a trust fund set up for Tommy's schooling. Ben smirked but said nothing until he pulled out a little high-pitched buzzer for further security. Finally, Isaac inquired in confusion. "That is it. So if I sign this, they will leave me alone and I will be unable to return to it?" Ben, still smirking, responded. "Yes, that's correct." Isaac was silent for a moment. "The house was mine before we got married, so that is an absolute waiver. It remains mine. Please board it up and erect a fence around it. Turn off the water but leave the electricity on. Because that butthole is going to adopt Tommy, he can cover her tuition. Can you do that? 5 times. 12 times $5,000 equals $300,000, right? Just pay it in one flat sum. And half of our savings are approximately $700,000. Offer her roughly $1 million and urge them to take the lump sum. No house, no trust funds. Otherwise, we'll start a war and make it as brutal as possible." Ben grabbed his belongings and informed Isaac that he would make a counteroffer before turning off the buzzer. He said, "Did Lydia know about the investment fund?" Isaac responded, "I mentioned it from time to time but I never told her how big it was." "Has the city paid for the traffic lights software change yet?" "I am guessing not. I would remind them if I were you. This sum of $175,000 is your fee. I might need you again in the future." Ben returned home depressed and delighted at the same time. He was sad that his friend would disappear for another 5 years in prison for something he did not do. But he was also delighted that he could finally afford the property he and his girlfriend had been eyeing. But first, they had to acquire $175,000 from the town. Ben was aware that they were legally compelled to pay it, but he expected them to do everything possible to avoid it. The next day, Isaac arrived at his new residence following the warden's mandatory speech. He was brought to his new home when he found himself in his cell. The biggest man he'd ever seen stood in front of him. He was told that KTU was the most powerful bully in the prison and that, as promised, he would be warmly received. K2 focused on writing something on a piece of paper. Isaac took everything for granted and gently cleared his throat. K2 growled at him. "If you ever tell anyone that I can't write well, you will suffer a miserable death." Isaac was stunned and inquired. "Nobody took the time to teach you." K2 looked up, surprised. You are the first to ask that question. I have had to work since I was 8 years old. What are you attempting to write? No offense. A letter to my grandmother. She turns 87 next week. Can I help? If you tell me what you want to write, I will write it down. No, I prefer to write it myself. I have not finished it yet. You are welcome to rewrite it once I have finished writing. That is a good idea. K2 screamed excitedly and clapped him on the shoulder. Be careful. I am not a mountain. Don't you want to learn how to read and write? I can teach you if you want. When the mountain guy who everyone was frightened of replied, yes, tears welled up in his eyes. I would like that very lot, but if you inform the others, Isaac instantly responded to. Defuse the situation, why should I do that? You are trying and that motivates me to support you. Anyone who tries deserves assistance. My name is Isaac. What are yours? I am Fabian Small. Don't laugh, but everyone calls me K2. I am not sure why, but they call me K2. K2 is the world's second tallest peak. It is also the most deadly peak in the world. Far more perilous than Everest. I believe you need to maintain Fabian's reputation. Isaac grinned at the words. After then, K2 broke the ice and dictated his letter to his grandmother. Isaac wrote it in bold, block characters, and K2 easily copied it. Lessons soon began. After 2 weeks in custody, Isaac received a phone call. He received visitors, although he wasn't expecting them. Before leaving to prison, Isaac's brother reprimanded him during his only visit and told him he didn't want anything to do with him anymore. The only person he expected to see was Ben, who wasn't scheduled to see him until the next week. Isaac entered the visitor's room and noticed his soon-to-be ex-wife and daughter at a table near the back wall. He came over to the table where the guard was sitting and said, chuckling, "Come and gloat. Here is your chance." He turned and told the guard, "I've had enough. I want to return to my jail, please," and walked out again. He could hear Lydia crying behind him. "Isaac, please wait." He simply moved on and the door closed behind him. Isaac turned to the guard and inquired, "Sir, is there any way to prevent this from happening again? They banned me, and now they come to rub up against me. I can definitely do without such guests." The guard told Isaac that he would speak with the warden. Ben and Isaac sat in a tiny conference room designated for attorney-client interactions. Ben, as usual, let out his noisemaker before stating, "I have an amended divorce proposal. Here." Isaac lifted his eyebrow. "What do you mean by modified, more money? What is there more of?" Ben looked over his papers and said, "No, Lydia is willing to give up half the money if she can speak with you." "I apologize, Ben, but you will not be the bearer of terrible news to her. Please inform her directly that I'd rather pay $500,000 than talk to her or her friends and family." "Isaac, that is an extremely pricey disclaimer. You recognize that, don't you?" "Yes, Ben, yes, I'm aware of this, but it's only money and I've been humiliated enough. Please pass forward the message and may they rot in hell." Ben sighed, "Okay, I will do anything you ask. Is there something else I can do for you?" Isaac smiled in anticipation of what came next. He said, "Yes, you can. I need children's books to read. Starting at level 1 and progressing to the highest, level 2 for each level." He wasn't disappointed. Ben's mouth dropped open and his eyes became as huge as saucers. Ben stammered. "Why do you need this? Did they blow your mind out?" "No, but keep this a secret. This is for my cellmate. I'm teaching him to read and he's quite excellent at it. So I need books for him to read." Ben smiled. So characteristic of Isaac manner. "Good. I'll take care of it. The guards and prisoners were overjoyed when Isaac received a parcel in the mail the following week. One of the guards unpacked the books and remarked on Isaac's intelligence. Isaac simply shrugged and took the criticisms without responding. Cato was upset in the cell after hearing these words, but Isaac simply laughed and replied, "Don't worry. You and I know better. Let it be the case. Now I want you to get started on these 2 novels. When you're finished, I'll have questions. Please read them carefully." "What? You want me to read books?" "I do not need to read books. I want to be able to read so they can't trick me into anything." "That is where you are severely misguided, my friend. Even more than you realize, first reading books improves your ability to read newspapers and other materials by making words easier to recognize. Second, and I believe this is more essential, reading books teaches you much more than just how to read better newspapers, and they can be a lot of fun if you can read well. Please indulge me. Please begin reading the literature and avoid drawing attention to yourself." Fabian hummed. "Okay, I will try. But only because you addressed me like a friend." "So are you?" And Isaac extended his hand. Cato's enormous PA pinched it and he said, "Yes, you are my first and only friend." Isaac's only thought was that K, too, must have had a very lonely life, and he could remedy that for the giant. Isaac entered his cell with difficulty. He had bruises all over his body. Kata quickly sprang to his feet, forgetting about the book, and helped Isaac into his bunk, furiously, and with a rock-scraping sound. He inquired, "What the heck happened?" Isaac attempted to recover his breath and wheezed. "My wife appears to be determined to take my house. So her pal, Sheriff Peter Ramsey, messaged me, you do not want to give up your home." K, too, hissed, "You will be beaten until you give up." "I don't care if they beat me to death, the house is mine and will remain so, if only for emotional reasons. But it aches." K, too, gazed at the man. "You mean I could see it? Could you describe them?" Isaac came up with a description of one of the 4 men before heading to the prison ward the following day. 4 more men were admitted to the jail ward, each of whom caused significant damage to the other convicts and guards. The message was perfectly obvious. Isaac was to be left alone for the next month. K, too, proved to be a sponge for information and an avid reader. He was extremely clever and only illiteracy had hampered his progress. He was quickly catching up on his reading. He also began sending other detainees to Isaac, later known as Doc Isaac. There were now approximately 10 offenders in Isaac's class who required training during one of these classes. A conversation arose regarding life after jail and the challenges of finding work. Several of them nodded. When Isaac inquired why they were in prison for the second time, they responded that it was doubtful that anybody would hire an ex-convict, especially for extremely low pay, and that they needed an investor or a bank loan to establish their own business. Because of their histories, both were unlikely or had extremely high rates. That gave Isaac an idea. He asked them what kind of business they wanted to start. With only 4 months left, one man disclosed to Isaac that he was a baker and wanted to build a bakery of some sort. So Isaac instructed him to create a plan listing everything required. The man stared at him curiously until Isaac explained that it was a math assignment. Kay was also in that class. So Isaac asked him what he intended to do after he served his term. Kay told Isaac that he truly wanted to work in the security industry. Isaac smiled and commented, "It takes a thief to catch a thief. I've got an idea. And if it works, I can help you from now on. You are my head of security. Deal with the common sound of stone grinding on stone." K2 replied, "Yes, I agree. Very much so. They shook hands again during Ben's monthly visit. Isaac discussed his concept. He planned to establish an investment fund that would help ex-convicts start their own enterprises. The fund would also assist them with legal and financial red tape. Would Ben have wanted to participate? Isaac intended to use some of his investing cash as seed money following the divorce. Ben paused for a bit before saying, "I agree. You handle the financial side and I'll handle the legal side. Let's strike a bargain and I'll start to work right now." What a wonderful idea. Then he got reflective again. Isaac quickly grabbed him under his arm and asked tenderly, "What's eating you? Spit it out." Ben responded, "I had a long conversation with Lydia. She signed the divorce papers and is now simply seeking for half of the savings with no alimony. She was upset by your reaction and I believe she understands that you do not have the opportunity to speak with her. She will not claim the house or ask for Thomason's education fund. I brought you the documents to sign." Isaac signed the divorce paperwork. Lydia surprised me by changing her mind. 6 months later he was back to being single. His initial idea was freedom, but it turned out to be the contrary. Isaac began to get used to life in prison. Isaac's and Ben's investment fund was doing quite well. They had already helped numerous convicts acquire jobs or start their own enterprises. And now the money they had invested was starting to bring in good profits. Isaac was highly regarded and any newcomer who tried to joke with him got a very severe lesson in good manners. Isaac was even given a separate room for his teachings as the guards and wardens were fully aware of the calming effect Isaac had on these individuals. This made their work considerably easier. One day a social worker approached him and questioned, "Why isn't your name still up for parole?" Isaac decided to state it frankly because the warden is a friend of Sheriff Ramsey Day. And his reports on me are consistently negative. As a consequence, I don't even want to be paroled. Besides, if I get paroled, who's to say that my parole officer isn't also one of Ramsey's cronies? Could they, on a whim, put me back in prison and give me extra time? No, not for me. I'll be out in a year and totally free. You don't have much faith in the legal system of this city? No, ma'am. I was set up by the sheriff and my ex-wife after I found them performing filthy deeds. But I can't prove it. Please don't talk to me about a fair legal system. Is that all, ma'am? Yes. Yes. I'm sorry to bother you. Don't think about it, ma'am. The detainees are quite thrilled with my presence. Good afternoon. The woman looked concerned as Isaac left. Isaac went to his training and self-defense session. He didn't like self-defense, but K2 insisted on it. During his almost 4 years in prison, Isaac had lost almost all of his body fat, which had been replaced by strong muscle, only because K2 required him to train. And after the last event, K2 had began teaching him how to fight to incapacitate his opponent as swiftly and thoroughly as possible on his trip from the gym to his cell. He was intercepted by a guard. The warden wants a word in his office now. Darn. What did they come up with this time? Am I in trouble? He thought, feeling his gut lurch outwardly serene and balanced. He answered, "Yes, sir, do I need to clean up or can I go like this?" The warden answered, "Now you may tidy up later." 5 minutes after the knock on the door, Isaac found himself in the warden's office. The warden dismissed the guard and inspected Isaac over. "You might want to clean yourself up beforehand." Isaac decided against the obvious answer and kept mute. After a while, the warden added, "I was informed, you know something about computers? Is this true?" "I was a computer programmer in a prior life." "Warden, sir, that doesn't solve my question." Prisoner. The inquiry was, "Do you know anything about computers?" There was something suspicious here. If the man was having computer troubles, why didn't he merely phone the city council's Information Technology Department? Isaac decided to take a chance. Sir, a computer contains two elements, software and hardware. If it's a software problem, I can probably solve it. The hardware problem, the machine itself is less likely. There's nothing wrong with the machine. Now sit down and start looking for the fault with those words. He exited the office. Isaac, expecting a trap, started checking the computer. It is both a problem and a trap. The internet icon is in a prominent area and they know that I have asked for the permission multiple times. All of them have been denied, as have all the others. He has determined he will not go there. I presume they will keep an eye on the link. He started conducting some research. The first thing he found was a keylogger, cheeky. Any more surprises? He smiled to himself and continued checking. After half an hour of effort and with a huge sigh of satisfaction, he identified many troublesome directories and files poorly hidden, probably by an amateur and no match for a seasoned professional, even if the latter was a touch smug. But most significantly, he found the problem, even for a talented amateur. It was very straightforward, but Isaac wasn't about to tell the warden about it. Isaac waited, standing next to the desk and folding his arms till the warden and the guard entered the office again. They seemed disappointed. The warden asked with displeasure. "Did you find the problem?" "Yes, sir." "I can explain it in private, please." The warden looked at the prisoner, who seemed absolutely calm, and motioned to the guard to be left alone. Only after the guard closed the door did Isaac begin in a calm, but forceful voice. "I found a big amount of photographs and movies on this PC. I also found an application that records everything that happens on the keyboard. The downloaded video contained a software worm, which is currently steadily devouring your files, including program files. You can claim that I downloaded these files, but the ISP also monitors the internet connection. Thus my lawyer will always be able to demonstrate that I did not connect to the internet. I can address your problem, but I need internet access to download some of my cleaning apps." The warden appeared even paler than he was. It was a trap that had failed. He had planned to mislead Isaac into obtaining unlawful internet access so that he could report it and add another year to his sentence. He now faced a larger challenge. "Okay, you now have unrestricted access to the internet. Now start figuring things out." "No, sir. That won't happen until my lawyer writes that I am not liable for the contents of your computer and that you are giving me unrestricted internet access." "How dare you?" the warden shouted. Isaac fell silent and withstood the warden's scrutiny before finally speaking. "Alternatively, you can contact the city's Information Technology Department to resolve this issue." The warden finally muttered, "Who is your lawyer?" Isaac arrived on the scene late one night a week later. The warden did not want anyone to know that an inmate was tampering with his computer. So the first thing Isaac did was turn off the keylogger. He then compressed the files. However, he did not delete them from the computer. He hid them so that another programmer could find them in time while the amateur could not. When he was finished, he installed and activated his preferred internet software before beginning to search for solutions to the computer's problems. When the issues were finally resolved, he started brainstorming. I'm curious what his home looked like now and if his alternative and hidden security systems were still functional. He paused for a moment to recall his IP address and password, which made him happy. The system was still functional, but what he saw astounded and horrified him. The house was almost destroyed, and in the midst of the chaos stood Sheriff Ramsdale directing several men carrying something. He heard Ramsdale shouting, "Come on. We haven't had all night. It has to be on the streets tomorrow." Isaac suddenly realized how he would retaliate, and a plan formed in his mind. He had some unfinished business to attend to first and he was smiling broadly. He started preparing his computer. He created a small program to make his security system available for viewing and downloading live images, loaded it into the system and tested it to ensure it was working properly. When it was finished, he removed all evidence of his tampering. He replaced the keylogger with something similar but less easily detectable. Finally, when everything was ready, he destroyed the malware he had previously highlighted, but left one minor flaw that allowed it to return in a year. Just as Isaac was finishing up, a supervisor burst into the office. "Are you done?" he asked impatiently. "Sir, I have just finished. I believe I have everything, but I'm a little out of it. If you have any issues, sir, please call." "You bet. I'll call and I won't be as lenient. The guard will escort you back." "It's missed." "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." Isaac walked out of his cell. Kata only looked at Isaac and asked, "What are you up to?" "You resemble the cat that swallowed the canary." "Revenge, Fabian. Revenge. Now who have we scheduled to speak with?" "Ben Green, I need you to deliver a letter. Do you have a pen and paper?" A week later, the completely stunned FBI agent read with increasing confusion. The letter was handed to her by the attorney sitting in front of her. In this letter, Isaac detailed what had happened to him as well as what was going on in and around his home. At the bottom, there was a series of numbers and what appeared to be a password. She asked the lawyer, "Do you still have time? I need to consult with our IT team before Ben could respond to the woman." She dialed the number and barked out a few commands, causing Ben to mutter and suppress a smile. "I have all day if you need it." The agent was thrilled. If this was accurate information, they would finally be able to catch that corrupt jerk. Ramsey Day. The IT specialist entered with a cart containing, among other things, computers and hard drives. When everything was ready, they tested to see if there was a connection. Ben confirmed that it was Isaac's house and was shocked by its state. After that, they released him. The letter stated that the majority of the action began late at night, shortly before Isaac's release. The house was in turmoil. He was waiting for a visitor. When Peter Ramsey Dale entered to speak with a lawyer, he was shackled and accompanied by 2 guards as he was loud and rude. Suddenly he noticed Isaac smirking at him. Isaac couldn't help but laugh aloud. Ramsey Dale became enraged, shouting, "What are you laughing at? I still have friends outside. They'll look after that piece of button, that little tramp. And once they're finished, we can always sell them to a brothel." No 2, who had been planning his future with Ben, flinched when he saw Isaac turn ashy. And look at Ramsey Dale with a fierce hatred in his eyes. Isaac became distracted by his visitor. She led him into a small conference room and took out a device from her bag that looked similar to the one Ben always used. Finally, she said, "Thanks. Your signal, combined with the information obtained from your security system, assisted us in catching them in the act. He will spend a significant amount of time in jail, but that is not why I am here. Due to the sheriff's off-duty activities, he owes the IRS a significant amount of money. Normally, when someone reports tax fraud to the IRS, they receive a reward. We thought we'd give you this reward as a thank you. Of course, we don't know how much it will cost yet." Knowing this favor, Isaac marveled at their effort and responded, "I am grateful. Thank you. I'm content enough to see the jerk behind bars as it is." They talk some more. The agent was trying to figure out how Isaac had accessed his security system. Isaac smiled and avoided all questions. He still had a score to settle with the warden for depriving him of all the rights he deserved. Also, the warden had issued negative reports to keep him in prison. That night, Peter Ramsey awoke in his high-security cell. He was dizzy and lying on his back, which made him uncomfortable as he stretched his arms and legs out in various directions. He attempted to roll over into a more comfortable position, but it did not work as he expected. He was tied down. "Have you threatened Doc Isaac? You'll pay if you entertain his wife? It will cost more." The voice appeared again. "If you try to threaten Doc again, you will learn that we can reach you at any time and from any location. Now listen very carefully. If Doc Isaac stumbles and you or any of your little friends are in the neighborhood, or if anything happens to Doc's family or friends, no matter how far away, we'll come and get the other, not if you understand. We also think it would be appropriate for you to apologize to all of us for the inconvenience you have caused this man, but I suppose that's not in the stars." Following the incident, the startled former sheriff nodded vigorously in agreement. A guard led Isaac through the prison maze before watching him leave through the back door. Isaac boarded the bus and purchased a ticket for a simple reason. He needed transportation, communication, and somewhere to sleep for the night. That's where he benefited from the XCOM Services Network. XCOM had opened at the same time as Isaac and Ben's investment firm, ES Bex Con Investments. After 3/4 of an hour, Isaac got off the bus and walked for another half hour to the parking garage. There he was, greeted with a rousing shout, "Doc, you are out. Welcome back. Do you want a drink?" Isaac smiled widely. "No thanks. I need transportation. What have you got for me?" The man smiled back and responded cheerfully. "Ben had already informed us that you were coming. I chose a Nissan truck. It's a nice and clean truck. Cabs have low mileage and powerful four-wheel drive. It is right here." Isaac looked at the truck, smiled, and said, "It's a perfect fit. I will take it." "How much?" The man appeared shocked. "I can't ask you to pay after everything you've done for me. Nope. I can't do that. I'll settle for a discount, but no freebies. And do not argue." The man exhaled. "Ben predicted that we would figure things out. Are you enjoying a cup of tea?" Isaac waited for the paperwork to be sorted. He started the truck shortly after that. He became acquainted with the layout and operation before heading out to see his trusted. Late in the afternoon, he sighed deeply and sank into a comfortable chair. He addressed Anna, now Ben's wife. "It has been a long time. I have sat in a chair like this." Anna smiled at Isaac. She was very fond of the man. She had visited Isaac in prison several times with her husband. And she, like her husband, was convinced he was innocent. At the same time, she noticed that his face was very haggard. Many unsettling wrinkles had appeared on it. His eyes were once soft and bright, but now they are sad due to his beard. His face was no longer as simple to read as it once was when she could read him like a book. His manners, however, remained those of a gentleman, courteous, well-placed, and gentle. Isaac brought her flowers. Even though he was unable to attend Ben and Anna's wedding, he remembered it vividly. She informed Isaac that Ben could come at any time and would pick up the Indonesian food on his way home. They knew it was Isaac's favorite meal. Ben walked into the hall with great enthusiasm. "What is that ugly sapphire truck doing in my driveway?" He laughed and the men hugged. "Welcome back, Isaac. I'm so glad you're here." Isaac just nodded abruptly at a loss for words. Anna stroked his back and quietly told him, "It's fine. We understand. Take your time." Isaac flinched. He shook his head to relieve the gloom and said, "Sweet home." The spell was broken. "Isaac, what would you like to drink?" "Beer." Isaac thought for a moment before replying. "No, just some sparkling water. I haven't had any alcohol in 5.5 years. I will keep it up." Anna began to serve dinner but abruptly stopped in front of the two hungry men holding a tray of delicious-smelling food. She smiled and said, "Now that you've caught my attention, I have something to say. We will use this evening to celebrate. Tomorrow you can go back to fighting dragons, deal?" The two men immediately agreed. It set the tone for an enjoyable evening. For the first time in nearly 7 years, Isaac felt calm and relaxed. Near the end of the evening, Ben informed Isaac that they had already prepared the guest room for him. Isaac felt slightly awkward and said, "This is too much. I can go to a hotel." Anna spoke in a tone that would not tolerate objections. "I insist that you spend the night here. Tomorrow you'll probably want to go look at your house. I do not think you should go alone, so let's go with you." "That is also out of the question." Isaac gave in. "I am currently in your debt. I'm dead tired. Please show me where I can stay the night." Anna spoke again in the same tone. "Are you out of your mind? Where are your friends? You know, get that in your thick skull. You darn sure paid for the majority of this house with money from the traffic light project. Ben will show you the way. Tomorrow will be a new day. Much more gentle." Anna spoke to Isaac. "Sleep well, big guy. Do not forget that. We love you too." Isaac did not sleep well that night. The bed was overly soft. It was too silent. He missed K2's snoring and the noise from the prison. He eventually fell into a restless sleep. For a stood and watched people pull up to the house at the end of the street. They arrived in 2 cars, stopped at the gate, and got out. 1 woman and 2 men. Since the FBI had used her home as an observation point prior to the raid, she was concerned about strangers showing up. She pulled out her binoculars. The FBI agents had forgotten to bring something with them and looked around carefully. A man and a beautiful woman were clearly in love with one another. She waited until the thin, bearded man stepped out of his blue truck and looked around carefully. She pointed the binoculars at his face, which revealed crow's feet around his eyes when he turned to look around. She had a good look at his eyes. She inhaled sharply. They were light brown and showed intense pain. She also noticed that the couple was looking at the man in his ill-fitting clothes with great compassion. Finally, the 3 of them walked through the gate and into the front door, after which the lone man returned to his truck and picked up a crowbar. They then entered the house. Laura lowered her binoculars and prepared to pick up her son from school. Isaac walked through the ruins of his house's interior from 6 years ago. Everything around it appeared to be ruined as a result of what had occurred. For Isaac, it was just another building. The furniture had been stained, chipped, and damaged beyond recognition. The kitchen was so dirty and broken that it needed to be replaced. There was an unpleasant odor in the bedrooms. The entire house smelled like a public restroom. In some places, it smelled worse than a prison. Electrical wires had been cut or ripped, and the ceiling had been torn down so that the main security system could be turned off. All of the electronics, computers, and other valuables were missing, most likely stolen. Isaac wondered if he could ever call this place home again. He left the house again and went to his truck, opening the back to get his belongings out. He purchased 3 folding chairs, a tent, a sleeping bag, and other camping supplies, such as a stove yesterday. He also purchased toiletries, clothing, and towels. Isaac began moving everything he could carry into the house. Laura returned with her 10-year-old son, Timothy, just in time to see Anna, who was asking the sad man a question that both women were surprised by. At this point, Isaac lost his temper. After assessing the damage to his home, Isaac gradually lost his resolve. All that remained of his life before prison was a bare husk, tainted by abuse and bad memories. He set up his bed and kitchen utensils in the cleanest room he could find and was about To relax in the sun. When Anna softly asked Isaac, "Is this a good idea? I can see you are very anxious. Please come back with us." That was the final straw. Isaac collapsed into the chair beside the front door where he had just reclined and let go. Sobs shook his body, tears streaming down his beard, seeping into his coarse hair and staining his shirt. He cried out in frustration, pain, and grief, shaking Anna to her core, then jumped out of the house and hugged Isaac tightly. "It's okay. We are here to catch you. Simply let it all out. I got your back. Let it all out. We understand." Ben spoke softly to the distraught man and whispered to Anna himself. "He's finally showing some emotion." Isaac took a while to come to his senses. He finally hugged his two friends and thanked them. "I would not have known what to do without you. I'm calmer now." The way they treated the house was simply unbearable. "Anna is still very worried?" asked Isaac. "We should get going. Are you certain you want to stay here? Please come with us." Isaac smiled slightly. "I am fine now. I need to get a new phone and start doing business. This is my house and I intend to make it my home again. Do not worry. I'll be fine with something more practical. Your phone numbers, please." "I only know Ben's office number." The two handed Isaac their business cards and went silently to their car while Isaac returned inside as they were about to get in the car. "Good morning. I am a neighbor. I apologize for the intrusion. May I ask you something?" Anna looked at the woman. She had a gorgeous face. Despite the worry lines framed by a halo of curly light brown hair, she was slightly overweight but still shapely and graceful. Anna responded curtly due to the intense emotions she had been experiencing in the previous few hours. "You are welcome to ask questions, but I am not sure I can or want to answer them. By the way, I'm Anna, and this is Ben. I am Laura Winstead and I live there with my 10-year-old son Timothy. I was wondering if your friend was okay. It's been a bad neighborhood lately, so I'm concerned about my sons and my safety." Ben laughed aloud, but Anna replied, "Laura, your neighborhood has improved dramatically. There's nothing wrong with Isaac. He'll improve with time." Laura wasn't yet relieved. "So he isn't dangerous?" "I apologize for asking, but it was really bad, Isaac." "Dangerous?" "No, Laura. Despite what the rumors say, he is not dangerous at all. He's one of the most gentle people I know. With those words, he will most likely be the best neighbor you have ever had." Anna got in her car and drove away, leaving the confused woman behind. Isaac was walking through his home. He noticed that the wires in the fuse box were not cut. Maybe the fuses were gone and the small black box hidden in the niche above the door appeared to be unaffected. It was the fuse box for the solar panels which powered the home's backup security system. The other panels powered the system outside, which ultimately led to Peter Ramsey's death. He walked straight into the study, which had once been his office but was now covered in trash, empty cardboard boxes and the like. His desk remained against the wall, covered in dirt as he pushed everything aside. He flipped the desk over with great force and propped up the base. It arrived, and behind the hatch was the backup security system, blinking green. Isaac thought she was still here. This has proven to be a very worthwhile hobby, assuming of course it is still functional. He was pretty sure they hadn't found a single camera or microphone, otherwise they would have torn the house apart to find the system and add a computer or laptop to the list. He had a thought. Isaac never bothered taking notes. His memory had not failed him yet. The afternoon was spent shopping. The phone, ISP, tablet and laptop computer will arrive later because they cannot be charged. Flash drives and a small generator provide electricity. Solar panels weren't enough to meet his needs. He returned home with a truck full of stuff and dinner. After finishing his dinner, he took out his cell phone and called Ben. "Hey Ben, this is Isaac. Have you got a pen and paper?" Isaac gave Ben his phone number and new email address and requested a list of XCOM companies. A few minutes later he got a reply. Ben could always predict Isaac's train of thought and had everything ready in advance. Laura looked out the window the next morning and saw her new neighbor sitting in the morning's sun in a folding chair at a folding table holding a laptop and talking on the phone. Laura looked things up online and became even more perplexed. The man had been in prison for 5.5 years for assaulting and physically harming his wife and daughter, so he deserved the punishment. You had to be extremely cruel to another human being. But this man and woman assured me he was harmless. Laura considered and decided to be cautious. Today she only had Timothy to care for because she was only working part-time. She wished she had more hours, but that was out of her control. Her employer was extremely rigid. She was eating breakfast with Timothy when a van drove up to the house. It said on the side, "Ex-convict services." Below it was written the following: "We've had a difficult time learning to be honest. But now we do honest work for an honest price. Call with a phone number." She saved it so she could check it online. Two men stepped out of the car and greeted Isaac with a smile and a handshake. They carried a thermos flask and a large bag. Isaac laughed as they all made their way inside the house. Isaac noticed that his neighbor had been watching him the day before. He noticed her look again and thought, "Word will get around quickly. Perhaps we should postpone the introductions for now," and he began giving instructions to the men. "I need to clean everything up. We will begin with the kitchen, bedroom and my office over there. If you find something and are unsure what to do with it, it can be scrapped. Please come and ask." The same truck came up and unloaded a 40-yard dumpster. Laura looked outside again and noticed a minivan with an ESCOM Services sign on the side. A woman got out, looked around and gave the others directions. When she was finished, she walked to the back of the van, pulled out a large bouquet of flowers and rang Laura's front doorbell. Laura opened the door and the woman gave her the flowers with the words, "Regards Dr. Isaac for the inconvenience. And if we're being too loud, simply say the word and we'll stop." The woman walked away, leaving Laura's mouth open. Laura looked over to the other house and noticed Isaac sitting at a table near the front door. He looked up at her and waved. She held out the flowers, waved and went inside to find something to put them in. She felt oddly elated. 2 weeks and 2 dumpsters later, the house was free of the past and Isaac and the contractor had completed the plans to restore the interior. Admittedly it was far from finished, only his bedroom and a portion of the kitchen remained usable. Isaac was sitting at his regular desk near the door when the rain started. A shelter had been built next to the house and when it began to rain, he retreated beneath it because he enjoyed being outside in the fresh air and breathing in the smell of the forest. He was enjoying the sound of rain on the tarp when he noticed the car engine stalling. He noticed Laura was in a panic. He picked up his umbrella and walked over to her. "Good afternoon, we haven't been introduced yet. I am Isaac Manor, your neighbor." As you may have noticed, Isaac spoke with a slight smile to conceal his remark. "Yes, I apologize. I am in a hurry. I need to pick up my son Tim from school." Laura whispered, "I'm already late and my car," as she heard it. "Your car is not going anywhere. You're welcome to take mine if you don't mind being seen with an ex-con. I can give you a ride." Laura was surprised by Isaac's offer. She thought, feverishly weighing the pros and cons before saying, "I'm more afraid to drive that big truck of yours. Do you mind driving it?" "Sure. Grab your coat and get in. I need to lock up. Perhaps you could use some assistance with the car." Laura made an odd face as she whispered, "I cannot afford it. My ex Isaac interrupted her before they drove to school. Neighbor, I said, help. Do you mean help? You know, help with no strings attached and no payment of any kind. Simply a friendly face and a cup of coffee, sometimes that is enough. Laura felt embarrassed when he addressed her as a neighbor. She introduced herself as Laura Winstead. I apologize for being rude. Yes, please, if you can rear on it. The final word sounded hopeful and apprehensive. Mike pressed the speed dial button on his phone and switched it to speaker mode so Laura could listen in on dark. Came over the speakers. How are you doing and how can I help? I'm doing well, Keith. Could you please contact Joey and have him check out my neighbor's car? The keys are inside the ignition. The car has just stalled. We're picking up her young son. Sure thing, doctor. Anything else? Please have Joey call me when he has news, I will. And did you know that K2 is scheduled to appear before the parole board next week? Mr. Green has already been notified. Isaac left. Thank you. That's great to hear. Another startup. It already feels like a job. I'm going to need an assistant soon. Laura probably looked at Isaac in confusion when I tried to schedule an appointment with the garage. I have to wait at least 1 week. When and how will I get my car to this garage so quickly? Don't worry about it. Joey is already on his way with the truck. I believe you're their boss. Are they so quick to respond? No. I assist them in setting up their business. This is all there is to it. Don't try to tell me you haven't looked me up as an ex-con on the internet or heard any rumors about me. But the truth is that Ben Green and I founded BexCon Investments and XCOM Services to help formerly incarcerated people rebuild their lives. It's going very well. That is why I receive a little extra service. Laura looked at the man and saw him in a new light. If only he hadn't mistreated his ex-wife and daughter while driving up to the school. Laura got out of the car and waved when she noticed Timothy waiting for her. Timothy's face lit up as he noticed the car and exclaimed, "That's our neighbor's truck." Cool. Why is it here? Laura assisted him into the taxi and buckled him in. And she said, "Unfortunately, our car broke down again." Isaac turned and said, "Hello big boy, I am Isaac. If your mother does not mind, you are welcome to call me that as well. Now let us get you home." Joey took Isaac aside once they returned to the house. "Duck, this vehicle is a death trap on wheels. The motors are wrecked, but everything else is worse. What do you want?" Isaac considered what Laura had told him and inquired. "She cannot do without a car. Have you got anything in stock? I own a nice little Nissan Rogue, however, it is not a pretty color." "She can have it. Should I ask her?" "No, take this one and change it. Send me the bill. I cannot have dead neighbors or neighbors with dead children on my conscience." Joey approached Laura and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I need your car and ID, please." Laura was about to cry. "I need this car. I can't pay for the repairs." "Don't worry, ma'am. Duck has already taken care of it. I'll bring a replacement tonight." Laura stammered. "Isaac took care of it. He can pay for it. Is he always like this? And call me Laura, please. You have no idea, madam. Laura, he's one of the nicest people I know. Honest, intelligent and generous. And I know where that little preservation goes. No, Laura, he never asks for anything in return. You better not start a conversation with him because he considers it an insult. That's why everybody goes out of their way to help him with the work that needs to be done. He's still paying whether you want him to or not. And there are a lot of people who owe him." He paused for a second before adding, "And I, for one, don't believe for a second that he did this to his ex. I've seen him work out in prison. He just doesn't have it in him. I got to go. Sorry, Laura. I'll see you after dinner. Meanwhile, Isaac finally found the courage to open the backup hard drives, plugging them into the laptop. He began to check how long they had been functioning. The first recording started as soon as he had installed and activated the entire rig. He watched in silence as his wife backed away from her wedding vows. A few weeks of recordings later, he saw his discovery and subsequent conversation culminate in a threat as he left, and Ramsday arrived an hour later. What followed next nearly opened the gates of heck again. Ramsdale calmly explained how to get Isaac to comply. They would be made up at the makeup artists as if they had been mistreated. Lydia would report to the police that they had been attacked and hurt in Rams. They would take care of the rest. He will get Isaac to comply, after which Lydia will take the statement. What followed was a recording of the makeup artist going about his business and someone named Doc signing some papers. Isaac sat in silence, tears streaming down his face. He felt terribly betrayed. Suddenly he had had enough and quickly scrolled forward through the notes. He stopped when he again saw Ramsdale sitting in the house in the condition in which he had found him. Something caught his attention, something in the body language of the men, including the prosecutor and the judge present, made him play the part. He heard Ramsdale say no. This man has become a nuisance. He must be stripped of his ability to speak forever, just throw him in the lake with a concrete block around his ankles. That's when Isaac stopped his surveillance. He shut down the hard drives and called the woman at the FBI. It took a while, but when he finally got through and explained what he had witnessed, they arrived very quickly. Isaac had already packed up the 2 discs and told the woman, "I need a certified copy of the records of these dates." He handed her a note with the dates on it and continued. "These records show that I was framed and imprisoned despite my innocence. I'm going to settle some scores." Lydia was busy. She was working for the prosecutor, or as his secretary assistant, a job Peter had organized. She had managed to survive the whole thing because she had stopped seeing Peter shortly before he went to prison. She felt some guilt towards Isaac. But if Isaac just given up since she had sworn an oath in court, there was no turning back. And she had already paid a heavy price for that. Her daughter barely spoke to her because of that and also because they manipulated her into cooperating. She was just finishing the letter when the prosecutor and the woman entered the office. "Lydia, could you please come into my office for a moment?" As she entered the prosecutor's office, the woman remarked, "Please close the door and take a seat on the large television screens." Set up ahead of them, the woman presented herself as FBI Agent Smith and displayed her identification. She sat down and announced, "We are reopening the Isaac Manor case." Lydia became pallid, a lead ball started to form in her tummy, "and this is vital." "Why?" Agent Smith proceeded. "I think you understand why we are here. Don't you understand why?" Lydia, who was really apprehensive, asked. "I will give you some examples of why." Agent Smith responded dryly. The enormous screen flashed up. Lydia imagined herself sitting with Peter Ramsey and devising a strategy to frame Isaac. She lost consciousness after regaining consciousness. There was a loud noise that opened her eyes. She realized she was lying on the floor a few feet away from her. The prosecutor was wrestling with 2 big guys who were handcuffing him and losing severely. Her eyes filled with scorn. Agent Smith asked him, "Do you think you'll get away with this or this judge and probation officer? We have months of footage, including a conspiracy to destroy that you all attended. And it's all entirely legal because it was recorded in the house and given to us by the owner." Lydia confessed about a week later. Ramsdale was visited in his cell and formally charged with offenses punishable by more than life in prison. Lydia had been sentenced for lying and making a false statement to the police, Isaac learned. He calmly stated that he would disregard anything that could happen to his daughter's mother because it would leave her without a family. He approached Ben and told him that he planned to terrify Lydia to death as payback. Ben set to work. He stated the cash would be tiny, but he planned to sue Lydia for $100,000 every year. Isaac was in prison. However, Ramsdale would have to give up the family money. He's being sued for $1 million every year. Isaac was in jail for causing damage to his property and neighborhood. A lawsuit will also be filed against the city of Den seeking compensation for its role in his unlawful imprisonment. City officials quickly approved the compensation. Ramsdale, with his enormous ego, believed the case would be void. His lawyer accomplished his duty with as little effort as possible. He was irritated up with the ex-sheriff's demands. Eventually, the court determined that Isaac's claim was valid and the sheriff lost his riches. It helped that the money was going to Isaac and Ben's backs. Gun Investment Trust Fund. Lydia was terrified of Isaac's lawsuit. She was in jail. She no longer had a job. Her home would be foreclosed on since she could no longer pay her mortgage. Where would she find $550,000? She was not abused or mistreated while imprisoned. In some ways, the situation was even worse. Her cellmates totally disregarded her. They turned aside when she attempted to talk. She had her own cell because no one wanted to be in her neighborhood and would rather sleep on the ground somewhere else. Lydia overheard news of an investment scheme, and when she inquired about it, one of the guards cynically stated that many criminals owed her for dragging her ex-husband to prison. Otherwise, the Mexican finances would not have been founded in her sorrow. She had forgotten this again. Ramsey threw a tantrum shortly after learning that Isaac had been sued for $5.5 million. And an additional $500,000 for repairs. He screamed that he would kill Isaac and transport the two women to a Russian brothel. He received other guests shortly after that night. This time they were less loving, and Ramsey continued to cry, but now in pain. Isaac had been out of prison for a year. Day 2 had joined him in the free world, and they had quickly become friends. Isaac's house had been entirely rebuilt and reclaimed its previous glory, however its embellishments remained limited. Meanwhile, he quietly purchased every house that came up for sale in the cul-de-sac. That night, he went to bed, but after a few minutes he had to close the window due to the horrible storm that had swept across the land. He peered out, shook his head, and then gazed out again. He noticed Laura and Tim huddled at the doorway, soaked and shivering. He was angry. He grabbed the two raincoats that the workmen occasionally used and dashed downstairs, ignoring the fact that he was soaking. "What are you thinking about?" he shouted. "You are catching your death. Put this on and head up to the home." Laura was going to refuse, but a glance at Isaac changed her mind. When they got to Isaac's house safely, she glanced guiltily at the ground and whispered quietly, "I'm sorry. I was panicking and not thinking." Isaac quickly defused the issue and responded politely. "I'm sorry for yelling, that's how thinking about others affects me." "What happened?" "The fuse box blew." "Good. I'll get someone to look at it tomorrow. You can remain here tonight. I will change the linens on the bed, and you and Tim can sleep there. I'll sleep in bed tonight. Tomorrow we will look about your place. Please, no argument." Isaac found some t-shirts, directed Laura to the bathroom and instructed her and Tim to take a hot shower. He moved his bed inside the study to slumber when he heard a low sound. Turning around, he noticed Laura standing in the doorway, hiding his shame. He asked a little roughly, "Is there anything I can help you with?" "Yes, you are a giant dummy. I want to thank you." Laura blushed. She tenderly kissed Isaac on the cheek and inquired, "Why on earth would your ex dump you?" In addition, she performed it in a particular manner. "I have no idea. Anyway, I left her behind, knowing she was behind bars." Isaac stood up and announced, "I'm ready to tell you the reading version." Isaac explained how, as a hobby, he created and implemented redundant security systems that were so well hidden that criminals could not detect them. The outside system was accessible via the internet. That is what happened in the jail, and it was the end of the merchants and the sheriff. The other system was hidden in the home and unreachable to Isaac. Frankly, he anticipated it to be destroyed and didn't think much of it until he noticed. His office was completely undamaged and solely used as a dumping site for hard drives. "I discovered, among other things, evidence of my innocence," he said, finished. He sent Laura to bed. Tomorrow was going to be a hectic one. The next morning, a contractor arrived to assess Laura's home for damages. K2 joined him and Isaac introduced Laura to Fabian. Her tiny hand was entirely submerged in his massive paw. Timothy entered next and they shook hands as well. Fabian tucked his legs up and muttered, "Be careful, that hurts. You're stronger than you realize." The ice had broken. They went to the house for coffee and Fabian told Laura, "Don't drink my coffee without water." Laura laughed back, "I understand. I was surprised this morning by what he called coffee. The contractor has awful news." Laura's home was almost livable owing to neglect. Laura started to cry. Isaac came right to the point, "K2, could you lock my bedroom and give Laura the keys?" He looked at Laura and inquired, "Who is your landlord?" "My ex," Laura hiccups, "and he will not sell it to me." Isaac returned his gaze to Kay, who would handle that as well. "Okay, good, and have it forensically inspected before you give that butthole a price." Laura was astonished and said, "Why the lock?" "Because according to my neighbors, I still have a negative attitude towards women." "What time do you have to work?" "I do not have to work today. They pay me a pittance yet expect 150% of what they pay me. I'm barely making ends meet and can't get another work due of my ex." "What type of work do you do?" "I studied organization and business. I specialized in both and now I'm a secretary and a pool alongside other secretaries. And those prepared to supply additional services." Isaac pondered as he walked. He genuinely admired this woman who was battling with all her might for her son but was continuously undermined by her ex-husband and he needed a secretary. His job was fast expanding and he wanted more leisure time. So he asked, "I need someone to help me full-time. The task is becoming overwhelming and if I don't keep up, I will become a prisoner of my own trust. Would you be willing to work for me here in this house or from your own home once it has been renovated?" Laura blushed and felt warm, stammering she responded, "I don't have any references and I need to be able to care for Timothy." He nudged Laura again, sensing her suffering. "If you work at this house, I will set aside a room for Tim. He'll have his own small office and I'll help him with his assignments as needed." Isaac paused a moment before speaking softly, "Go ahead and make your move. It will free up your time and benefit me as well. I'll be working with someone I already know." "And you, like me?" asked Laura, very shocked. "Why else would I be so concerned about you if you were just a neighbor? You'd book a room at a long-term hotel. Now please answer yes, Anna and Ben will work with you to decide on the details." Laura ran into Isaac's arms, embracing him and kissing his cheek. "When do I start now? I suddenly want to decorate the house and do a variety of other things. I hope you will stay here while the house is being remodeled." "Yes, Timothy will be pleased too. But first, I need to quit my old work. May I use your phone?" Meanwhile, Timothy uncovered an ancient robot that Isaac had built as a hobby. It was one of the few intact items they had discovered in the house. He rushed over to Isaac holding it in his hands. Tim exclaimed, "What's this? Who built it?" Isaac smiled happily at the boy and replied, "I did. Let's find batteries and a remote control so you can play outside." 10 minutes later, the miniature robot arrived in the driveway, accompanied by the ecstatic yells of an 11-year-old boy. Isaac scheduled a babysitter for Tim, and an hour later, he and Laura were on their way to a huge shopping mall. "I quit my work. They weren't happy and gave me a raise and additional work," Laura explained. Isaac responded by pulling out into the parking lot. "I pray it is too little, too late. What do they offer?" Laura observed a look of worry on the man next to her. She had a thought. Does he truly care? She felt herself become warm and for an extended period of time slightly moist, in a very different location than her mouth. Laura decided to tease him a bit by asking, "What do you have to offer?" Isaac didn't miss a beat, $4,000 per month clean, free rent, and my deepest gratitude. Deal? Laura exclaimed enthusiastically, "But free rent? We don't have a house yet." Do not overlook Fabian's negotiation abilities, and no, he'll ask politely. Laura was astounded 2 weeks later by how quickly and efficiently the ex-con workers worked. She had already moved some of her possessions back into her. "Now you are free to go home." However, she did so with considerable grief. Laura became very connected to this sometimes gloomy man. Their working relationship was well established. The day started with an hour-long aerobic and fitness training. It was a program Isaac had followed in prison under Fabian's supervision, and as a result, he had become a very fit man who wanted to stay that way. Laura struggled with the workouts at first, but she could already see a difference in her condition. She found the work to be difficult at times, but she was also learning to cope with it. Much like with the workouts. A few nights later, Tim revealed that he had a new math teacher. Laura didn't pay much attention, merely half listening to her son's cheerful conversation. She was wondering about Isaac, and whether there was any way she could express her emotions for him. She was surprised to see an automobile in her driveway and studied it for a few moments. The driver didn't get out, but her attention was drawn to Timothy, who was passionately discussing how he was developing his own robot, with Isaac's assistance, of course. Half an hour later, she peered out again and noticed that the car was still waiting there, with the driver still inside, wondering why. She searched for it, walked up to the driver's side and knocked on the window. Thomas, often known as Tommy, had acquired a position as a math teacher at a school in her old area when her mother was sentenced to prison for perjury. Tommy needed to stop studying artificial intelligence and get a job there. She felt a twinge of jealousy as she heard him talk enthusiastically about developing a robot. She used to do it with her father until her mother went insane and became connected with the creeper. Later, as she was writing invitations to parent-teacher conferences, she discovered Tim's address. And her life fell apart. Could it be my father is assisting Tim? Did my father return to that house after everything that transpired there? She needed to find out. An hour later, she was sitting in the car with a small set of binoculars watching my father sit in front of his house. She was taken aback by how much older he appeared in comparison to the morning she had left for school, and she said her final goodbyes. She could not hold back her emotions, yet she was scared to approach him. Her mother wrote Isaac a letter shortly after his release, asking for forgiveness and asking if they could be friends in the future. Isaac's response came from his lawyer to her lawyer. "Only if you give me another 5.5 years of life, otherwise, keep away." There was a sudden knock on the window. Tommy was jolted out of her daydream and she rolled down the window in tears. The woman glanced at her and stated, "You're definitely not okay. Come inside to settle down a little, you can't drive right now." Tommy lost her footing for a time, allowing the woman to guide her inside. Tim had met her. "Hello, Miss Tommy, why have you come to see us?" Laura was taken aback but maintained her composure. "I am Laura Winstead, so you are." "Thomas, in a fashion, I teach Tim math at school. Please call me Tommy." Laura had a light bulb moment. "What do you mean?" Tommy bowed and answered sadly. "Yes, my father, I hadn't seen him in almost 6 years," and collapsed to the floor. Laura lifted her up and seated her on the couch. She told Tim to fetch some water and then asked him to go to his room so they could talk. Tim instantly obliged and Laura turned to face Tommy. "We need to talk, but first, you're not fit to drive, so you are going to stay here tonight. If there is one thing I learnt from your father, it is to help others when they are in need." Tommy gave a sigh of relief. She had finally found someone to chat to, albeit a stranger. She stared at Laura with a confused expression and Laura understood. She replied, "I know almost everything. Your father never revealed your involvement in the matter, only that you were adopted by Peter Ramsey Day." Tommy shook her head and added, "I was adopted. I refused. They eventually quit up after I realized what they had done to my father. I stopped speaking to my mother. I left that house when I became 18. I couldn't call it home anymore. But Hole and my mother split up soon after." Laura had to process this knowledge. Isaac was convinced that her daughter had been adopted. After a while, she continued, "I believe we must find a way to persuade your father to accept you back into his life. I want him to be as happy as possible. He still has a picture of you in his desk drawer." Do you remember Laura's tone when she delivered her brief speech? Tommy had to look at her attentively to comprehend the reality. She touched Laura's hand and spoke quietly. "We have just known each other for a brief period, but one thing is clear to me. Do you adore him?" Laura, who was despondent, flushed and responded, "Yes, but I'm not sure if I have a chance with him. Maybe I can help you by telling you what I know about my father. Based on my own experience and what my mother told me before she was brain injured by that butthole." "Sheriff, what do you mean?" "My mother once told me that below the shell and shine is a very shy man who does not want to impose himself on a woman in any way. The more he likes or loves her, the more he distances himself." Laura quickly brightened up. "Really? He's attentive. Do you suddenly have flowers on your desk? Tim tells me you've gone shopping. You saw something you liked in the store and then it was delivered the next day." Laura could only confirm everything. "He loves you. Do not worry. My mother also informed me that she would have to pursue him forcefully. Please care for my father. I really want him to be happy. I can't wait to see him, but I don't have the 5 years for him." This was his demand. "When can I get my 5 years back?" Tommy's tears threatened to spill over again. Laura was having a really awful night. After a particularly intense evening, a stranger slept at her home and explained how the man she had fallen in love with was built. Now that she had a better understanding of Isaac's structure, she needed to figure out how to get past his shield. She attempted to design a strategy, coming up with a few possibilities, but quickly abandoned them. She eventually decided to start dressing more provocatively, as reuniting father and daughter was not an option at the time. Isaac was already working out when Laura entered his modest gym. He was pleasantly surprised to see her. She was dressed in her regular sweatpants, but the loose t-shirt had been changed with a tight top that showed off her cleavage. As he watched her more closely, he realized that she was tightening up and losing weight. Laura decided halfway through the workout to put Tommy's allegation to the test, so she asked Isaac, "Can I have a day off? We're working our asses off. I need to unwind a bit and I need some new outfits. So I'd like to go shopping today. Tim is at school till 5 o'clock." Isaac exclaimed eagerly, "That's an excellent idea. Would you mind if I joined you?" I too want to spend the day away from the office. Laura wanted to hear it, but she claimed she was thinking about it. She observed Isaac's look go from pleased to somewhat anxious and quickly said, "I'd like that very much. You can assist me, choose a friendly company. Are you certain I will not take offense if you want to travel alone?" Isaac added, "I'm also your employer offering her an out." "Yes, you are, but you're also a great friend." She responded, kissing him lightly on the cheek, "But there is one firm rule." "What rule?" "No mention about work?" Laura responded with a tiny smirk at seeing Isaac smile. Laura thought, mission accomplished. Laura thought joyfully. "Now let's wrap up the training." "Yes, boss," Isaac joked. An hour later, the three of them were in the car, heading to Tim's school before dropping him off at the mall. They came early. Isaac and Laura took their time drinking coffee before going shopping. For Isaac, Laura forcefully informed him that he needed to get rid of his criminal image and start dressing nicer. Laura started having fun after Isaac was safely secured. She got rid of what she nicknamed Mama's fat. She also grew more confident and relaxed, because she no longer had to worry about how she would get through the week financially. She smiled as she turned sideways to examine her new look in the fitting room mirror. She sighed as she looked at the second outfit, which was lovely but out of her price range. She returned it to the rack. She then proceeded to the sportswear area, entirely missing Isaac's motion to the saleswoman. After lunch, they had a disagreement about who would pay the bill. Of course, Laura lost. They walked back to the car, burdened with bags and boxes. Laura never saw the extra bag among the rest of their purchases, which included a bottle of her favorite perfume. Laura arrived home and unloaded the stuff she had purchased. Tommy had struck the mark. She felt herself getting warmer. "I truly have a shot," she reasoned. The next day she went to the gym wearing a different top. By the third day, she had become desperate. By the end of her workout, her eyes were full with red tears. Isaac, taking one look at her face, rushed to her side and asked, "What's wrong, Laura? You are crying. Is there something I can do to help? In for a penny? In for a pound?" Laura was thinking, "I've got a problem with a dude." "What? Is he hurting you?" "In a way, the issue is that I love him, and I am truly in love with him." Laura blanched when she saw Isaac swallow, but she persisted. "The trouble is he isn't responding to my advances. I'm not sure what to do now. Have you got any ideas?" Isaac stammered. "Laura, you have gone to the wrong place for advice, but I will give it a shot. If this dude is that stupid, he should be knocked out. He will be incredibly foolish. It ignores you. You are intelligent, gorgeous, and have a large heart. Be as direct as possible. He will come to his senses." Isaac and Laura sit on the exercise bench. She blushed and continued, "I'll be as clear as I can. Isaac, would you make love with me here or in your bed?" To say Isaac was bewildered is an understatement. He stammered. "What about you? Do you mean me?" "Yes. You. You are a foolish man. You. Laura, do you love me? Really?" Her nod and smile made him smile in return as he grasped the truth. "Oh, that makes me very happy. Laura, please believe me. I adore you too. I have adored you since you were sitting in bed at the doorway. So why didn't you tell me?" "You're a fool." "I could not. Laura, I am both your employer and your master. When I originally helped you, I promised there would be no obligation or money. Just a friendly greeting and a cup of coffee. Once in a while is plenty. Remember, sometimes you are too nice for your own good. Now that the problem has been resolved, the question remains here or in the bedroom." At the same time, they dashed to the bedroom. Much later, the delighted couple lay on the crumpled bed. Laura was encouraging Isaac to get up. After they'd just taken a snooze. Isaac. It is time to fetch him up from school. So one of us should go take a shower. I'll shower first, then go fetch him. She pulled up to the school. Tim had already waited for her in the presence of Tommy. She stepped over and ushered Tim into the vehicle. Tommy smirked slightly and pronounced. Looks like you've got your man. Is it the other way around? You were just acting strangely while walking around. Laura laughed aloud and purred. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your father. You were very correct. Laura's window of chance opened 6 weeks later. They practiced in the mornings as usual. But Laura was noticeably tired. Isaac began paying closer attention to her. Later next morning, she refused a cup of coffee, preferring tea. And as someone walked by with a cheddar sandwich, she had to rush to the restroom. Seeing this, Isaac realized he'd had enough. Laura returned from a surprise visit. He told her he'd take the day off, because he still needed to see a customer. However, the latter was a massive white lie. As soon as Laura disappeared into her house, he drove to a mall with a good jeweler. Laura felt slightly better the next morning, but she excused herself from her workout due to a sickness. She had a nice night's sleep and arrived at her around 9 a.m. She anticipated to find Isaac at his desk, but someone informed her that he was in the workshop. That seemed weird. He always goes there in the afternoons. And he did not even say hi. What's happening here? She hesitated for a moment before walking over to her desk. She found 2 small numbered boxes, 1 and 2. Opening the first, she discovered a lovely antique pocket watch with a gold chain. There was a note underneath the watch. She opened the paper and began reading. Time flies and life is too short to waste. The employer is considering whether his PR will allow him to propose to her. He believes she is lovely on the outside and inside, and that she will become even more beautiful in the future. Laura's hands trembled as she felt everything heated inside. She unwrapped the second gift. Inside, she discovered 3 different pregnancy tests. She could feel the fire spreading throughout her body, pregnant. Isaac was the first to discover how they had entirely forgotten about contraception. She thought pleasantly. He appeared to accept it easily, perhaps even loving it. Laura was still perplexed and her thoughts were going in circles. Happiness, anxiety, and amazement. Everything was competing for a space in her imagination. She stood there till she heard a soft cough and turned around. She noticed Isaac standing in the doorway. She reddened again, reaching the depths of her cleavage. She responded modestly. Yes, my employer is permitted to make the offer silently. He took her hand and led her outside into the sunshine. He questioned her loudly and clearly. Laura went. Stud, will you honor me by becoming my wife? Yes, you fool. You did not need to make a formal request. I would have said yes otherwise. That's when she realized that about 100 men and women had observed this minor incident. When he carefully placed the palladium engagement ring with the emerald-cut diamond on her finger, there was a loud clapping. My God! She exclaimed. It's beautiful. Tim approached her holding a bottle of champagne and 2 flutes. Isaac addressed the bride-to-be. I made a bet. Yes, as you can see. Isaac then turned to the others and said, everyone here may have a glass in the garden. When the feast ended, Isaac and Laura traveled to Isaac's house. Laura was fed up with all the emotions. Congratulations and handshakes. They made themselves at ease in the living room and gazed out the large window at the forest. Isaac inquired after they had sat silently enjoying each other's company for some time. Where do you want to live? Could you live here in the ruins of my previous life? Should I build us a new home? This house needs serious repairs as is. Especially since you are pregnant. What do you want to do with your old house? There are a lot of questions. I like this house. It's spacious, roomy, and full of happy memories. If I can help with the renovations, please stay here. As for my old house, it's yours. So why ask me? When Fabian bought it, I decided to put the papers in your name. It's up to you to decide. But I'd hate to involve unknowns. So I'm asking if you know anyone who likes living there. If you want to sell it, I'll just buy it from you. And you'll just have to decide. Isaac smiled. A chance. A big chance flashed through Laura's mind. But it's an easy one right now. Isaac would give his consent immediately. If I asked him to jump off the cliff at this moment, he would do it without hesitation. You don't want him to feel manipulated, do you? Her heart raced. But she replied outwardly, calmly. I'll have to think about it. Maybe I know someone. The next day after lunch, Tim was excused from class. And Isaac and Laura decided to have an early lunch. Picked him up and head to the park. Isaac talked about what he wanted to change in and around the house. He wanted to add a pool with jets, so he could relax or swim properly. And a balcony with a door to the bedroom. He suggested building an attached cabin for Tim. First with a door to the main house. And then with its own entrance. There were a few other things. But nothing substantial. When everything was ready, Isaac asked if Laura already had a candidate for her house. Laura nodded affirmatively and took a deep breath. Yes, there is. And I really hate to offer it to you. Can you promise me that you will listen to me first? Think about it and only then answer. Please trust me on this. Isaac immediately felt apprehensive. But replied, yes, I can do that. I will listen first, think first and promise not to snap. But I suspect I won't like it. Laura replied. I think when you can step over your own shadow, you'll like it and make you very happy. Right now it's nothing. You know Tim has a new math teacher, don't you? And he really likes her. Isaac only nodded. She desperately needs somewhere to live. The house she's living in now is in foreclosure. And she has to move out within 2 weeks, Isaac asked, and what's the problem? Her name is Thomas in a manner and I emphasize manner, not Ramsday, as you always thought. Isaac sat stunned, mouth open, but unable to make a sound. Finally, almost exploding, he asked, what? Laura intervened, you promised. You're right, he muttered. Laura took Isaac's hand and in a soft voice began to explain. She never knew what they were doing to you. She thought the makeup artist was working on her portfolio. Her testimony was falsified by Ramsday. Every time she went to the authorities to complain and wanted to see you and release you, she was denied because of Ramsday. The judge was on Ramsday's payroll. And before you were sentenced, even your ex-wife thought it was only to force you into submission. As Laura spoke, Isaac's face turned different colors. Red, purple, white. And when she finished, he was ashy. She shook his hands and looked at his face. And saw tears streaming down his cheeks. Isaac whispered, poor thing. What do we do now? Confusion reigned in his mind. All he could think was almost 7 years lost. Laura kissed him gently and lovingly, to bring Isaac out of his personal hack. Finally, he snapped back. Ramsday will pay for this and it's going to be a very big bill. Don't do anything stupid, please. I don't want the father of our child. Yes, all 3 tests were positive. That was another thing I wanted to tell you. Where was I? The father of our child is back in jail. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to do anything illegal with that jerk. But what are we going to do about Tommy? Leave that to me. Can you get home in an Uber? I am capable of exceeding that. The contractor is going to drive me back. He must begin with a quote for the house's repairs. If you agree, Laura let out a smile. Your suggestion sounded amazing. You have my total trust. Now I'm out to pick up Tim and Tommy. She approached the school. Tim and Laura burst in. Can you give Miss Manor a call? Tim bolted again and returned a few minutes later. With Tommy, who seemed concerned. Laura grinned and purred as much as she could. To relieve the strain. I actually have a house for you that I can afford. Laura said something. Yes, effortlessly. We'll hop in and take a look right away. Yes, why wouldn't you? Tommy made her mind up. She couldn't help but trust the woman. And got into the car. Laura returned home. Tommy looked perplexed as they approached Laura's house. Laura exclaimed, "Here's your new house." As Tim rushed out of the car to enter. Tommy had no idea what was going on. What the heck is going on? This is your home. No, I'm getting married, which you can't afford. Literally, all you have to do is meet the owner. Tommy was hesitant. I'm not going to sleep with him, she screamed. Laura let out a hearty laugh. No, darling, he wouldn't think about it. Tommy is still in shock. She inquired as to when she will meet your mysterious host. And when can I start moving in? Laura's look was intense. For the time being, we'll just have to walk to the house next door. By the way, Tim and I, as well as our little Bambino, will be residing there. Finally, the quarter decreased. Laura took enormous delight in staring at Tommy. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Only to make an incoherent sound. She turned from white to red. And was eventually able to stammer. My, and mine, your dad? Yes, he is eager to meet you. We are getting married since your younger half-brother or sibling is on its way. Laura exclaimed joyfully. Tommy felt a wide range of emotions, including joy at having a decent location to live. She is overjoyed to be able to meet her father. And surprised to be a big sister. But there was also exhilaration. Because she hadn't had anything to say to her father in nearly 7 years. She had practiced complete speeches and created scenarios for their reunion. But she couldn't think of a single one. Laura took Tommy's hand and gently nudged her toward the house she had taken over. Tim dashed ahead, knocking loudly on the door as he always did. Isaac opened it with nervousness. Good day, big boy. Is it just you? Tim got up and said, No, Mom is coming with my math teacher. She's going to live with us. Really? Isaac stared at the 2 women and exclaimed. What a sight. 2 of the most beautiful and influential women in my life, side by side. When the women arrived at his door, he said gently, his voice trembling. Tommy, you've grown into a lovely woman. May I hug you? Tommy nearly sprang into his arms with a shout. They lingered for a long time, Daddy. Savoring the moment before Laura summoned them into the house. Tommy attentively examined her father. After she had entered. He had altered his behavior. Much has changed. He appeared much older when viewed through the binoculars. That was to be anticipated. However, he appeared to have aged considerably more than 7 years. Wrinkles had formed on his face, particularly around his eyes, giving him a sad expression. She remembered her father usually appearing A touch mushy around the waist. She realized there was no softness at all, muscle, bone, and skin. I apologized, Dad. Laura cut short their emotional reunion. Maybe you should continue your conversation somewhere private while I prepared dinner. Tommy, I assume you would like to remain for dinner as well. I approached Laura and gave her a firm hug. I appreciate it very much. I'm ecstatic now. And it's all because of you, Mom. Laura had watery eyes as she smiled. I would go to any length to make Isaac happy. Go talk to Daddy now. Isaac and Tommy made themselves at home in the living area, which had comfy seating and side tables in one corner. Isaac offered Tommy a soft drink and stated that the only alcohol available in prison was what they prepared themselves. I never picked it up. And when I got out, I figured I didn't need it. However, I don't mind if the others drink. Tommy nodded and she replied, I'm not sure where to start. Are you really going to offer me Laura's house? There are several difficulties that come to mind. Isaac let out a quiet laugh. That has crossed my mind. The only issue that could occur is the restraining order that she has against me. When she gets out of jail, I understand. She will have nowhere to live. You have a lot of space. Pay close attention, Tommy. You live here because you are Laura's tenant. As a result, I am unable to prohibit you from hosting guests and I refuse. But, and that is the only one. However, it is your mother. Keep your distance from me. I do not want her to be around me. That includes my garden and the front entrance. She does not belong here. When I see her on the street, I will ignore her. If you can live with it, the rest of the inquiry is skipped. I know, Dad. It will only be till she is able to stand up again. There are several other causes. I don't want Mom to be with me indefinitely. Isaac raised an eyebrow, but kept quiet. Tommy let out a long breath and purred. My boyfriend and I have a really serious relationship. I require space and solitude. And actually, we haven't gotten along since she became obsessed with that jerk. I hope Mom finds a job and a place to live soon. Isaac picked up on that and replied. Is she still working and accounting? Maybe I can get her a job. She should be able to afford to pay her rent. I paid about $500,000 to get rid of her. Something should be left over from it. Sorry, Dad. That butthole ripped her apart. And the butthole is entirely broken. He was forced to spend his entire fortune on compensation according to what I heard. She is in fact a certified public accountant. She is also a paralegal now that he is in butthole. Karma may be cruel. I'll look into getting her a job, but don't tell her about it. I am assuming you are paying her a visit in prison. Tommy agreed and nodded. Laura then stated that dinner had been ready. A few weeks later, Isaac and his daughter were conversing in the large house's living room. Tommy was questioned. When was the last time you visited your mother? I believe that was just before I moved here. Do you remember what happened? Your mom, you've got her all to yourself. Please stay in contact with her. If you don't, you might later regret it. Tommy was interrupted by a loud knock on the door. Isaac confirmed that it is Fabian. He's the only one who knocked on the door and stepped inside. Tommy heard the rumbling with which the massive man said, Isaac Duck, let me introduce yourself to Julian, my son. When she heard this, she dashed out of the room to meet Laura. Meanwhile, Fabian went on to say that despite his father's imprisonment, he makes me proud of him. He became a teacher when he expressed an interest in seeing you. I was hoping to see you as well. Julian stammered, his head beat red. I'm delighted to meet you, sir. My father has told me a lot about you. But I came to ask you a question. Okay, go ahead and ask." A really uneasy hush ensued. Julian looked down at his feet and spoke gently in secret. "Please, Isaac, let him into the den." However, Tommy had already left. He led Fabian's son to a chair and sat him down, saying, "What can I do for you, Julian?" Julian spoke quickly. "Sir, I intend to propose marriage to Tomasino. We've been lovers for a long time. And I believe it's time to make her an honest woman with your help. That is why I came, sir, to request your blessing." Isaac smiled widely. He addressed Thomas in a certain manner. "I am confident that you are paying attention. So come out of your hiding place and introduce yourself." Tommy entered the den with a smile. "That is correct, Dad. This lovely young man wishes to marry you. And requests my approval. Should I hand it over?" "Thank you very much, Papa, that would be very appealing to me." Isaac stood up from his chair, holding out his hand. "My blessings are with you, son. Take care of my daughter. It's time to rejoice." When Tommy stopped Isaac, he was on his way to follow Julian into the living room. "Dad?" "Yes, darling. Julian is still unsure. I'll inform him in a moment. But we are in a hurry right now. In roughly 7 months, you'll become a grandfather." This morning, the doctor confirmed the information. "Tommy, girl, you make me so joyful that I might burst. Do you want Laura and I to be married together? That would be terrific. We will talk about it when Fabian has left." They strolled into the living room, where Laura was smiling and Fabian appeared entirely indifferent about what was going on. Julian smiled as Isaac sat down. "Can I present you to my future wife, Daddy? It's Tom Messina. Mr. Manor just gave us his approval. May we also have yours?" Fabian was taken aback. He was stunned. "Naturally," he said, "yes. If you want it that way." Isaac extended his arm around him. "Come on, big buddy. We formed a family, not just in one sense, either." Who would have guessed it across from them? Julian had a perplexed expression. Tommy smiled as he spoke to Julian. "Yep, you're going to be a father. When we agreed to stay together, we also decided to have children while we were young. As a result, we gave up using condoms." Julian's first shot landed squarely on target. "So, Mr. Small, you'll have a daughter and a grandson." Lydia took a seat in front of her kid 2 weeks later. "Tommy, you look stunning." "Okay, Mom, I have a place to reside. And I'm planning to marry. I'm doing well in life." "That's okay. What is your place of residence? When is the wedding happening?" She gave the location and liked seeing her mother's face light up when she recognized it. "It's not far from Isaac's old home." "How are you going to pay for this?" "It's adjacent to Dad's. He continues to reside there. When I discovered him, we were reunited." Despite herself, Lydia got fascinated. "What method did you use to find him?" "It was all luck. His roommate, son, Laura, was one of my students. He showed me the small robot and explained that he had built it with his neighbor. When I saw the address, I went to investigate. Laura noticed me following her and approached me asking what I was doing. I explained and she and I communicated a few weeks later. To address your inquiry, I'll claim that my father owns all 5 homes in this area. That is why I am able to afford it." Lydia fell silent, attempting to process the information she had just heard. She inquired tentatively. "When exactly is the wedding taking place?" "We are awaiting your release from jail. You are invited because you are still technically my mother." Lydia's expression brightened. She would see Isaac again. And he couldn't say no to his daughter's wedding. Perhaps she'd try to speak with him. Who knows what will happen? She inquired about it with her daughter. Can I stay with you once I've been released? I have nowhere to go. The house has already been sold. I'm also looking for a new employment. Tommy breathed deeply. She didn't want Lydia to know that her father had already handled the situation. She just answered. You are welcome to live with me until the baby arrives. I will need a room by then. In terms of employment, have you contacted the ex-con service? They specialize in assisting convicted individuals in obtaining employment or starting a business. This is your child. Are you having a baby? Why didn't you tell me that right away? Based on how you're talking to me, I believe you are still upset with me. Are you unable to forgive me? Tommy was taken aback for a time. She actually does. That's foolish. She said, her rage unchecked. Mom, I only have one because Dad tells me so. Mom and I must keep in touch. Otherwise, you'd have seen me the last time you went to jail. You cost me more than 6 years with my father. And why is this the case? You were too selfish and cowardly to do what was right. And while we're on the subject, I talked a lot about everything with my father's girlfriend. I have no idea how you fell for that butthole. When you had my father. How did you accomplish that? Lydia was the next to be taken aback by the onslaught. She maintained her silence. She knew she was going to have to deal with some significant difficulties with Tommy. Isaac had a girlfriend, which surprised her. She never imagined Isaac would be able to transition to a new life so swiftly after being released. She also didn't expect him to return to the house. That had caused him so much grief, knowing that it had been trashed since she had visited after her split from Peter. She also questioned how he had come up with so much money to refurbish it. Lydia went back to her cell when Tommy left. Tommy's harsh comments were still ringing in her head. She had left Peter almost immediately when it became evident that she had been plagued, and the money had vanished. He wanted Isaac out of the way, not only because he needed her, but also because he required a location for his smuggling activities. Lydia had attempted to be a good mother to Tommy, and assumed Tommy's nearly antagonistic attitude toward her was due to puberty. She realized how much she had upset her daughter, who appeared to be much more attached to her father than she had previously imagined. Tommy's comments had shattered her soul. Lydia was furious that Tommy was pregnant, but hadn't told her she announced her wedding shortly after. Lydia understood she had a massive chasm to cover before Tommy would open up to her again. Lydia sat in her room at Tommy's. It wasn't a warm greeting, but it was welcome nonetheless. Tommy did not hug her, but he did say, "Welcome back, Mom, you're a guest here. I'd like to introduce you to Julian Small, my future husband and child's father." Tommy moved on once the introductions were made. "You are welcome to utilize everything in this house while hunting for work. You are welcome to use the laptop I placed in your room. Have you already contacted ex-cons?" Lydia stared down at her feet and said, "I tried, but they weren't interested in me. I seems to have been banned. Nobody wanted anything to do with me the entire time I was there. I'll check with Dad. Perhaps he knows why you have not been contacted." Julian made a comment. "He among others gets the last word on who is hired through Dexcom services. He also stated on Isaac's behalf that you would be treated politely, and that you would not be harmed. Otherwise, you would have an extremely hard journey. Isaac is very well liked. What is your father's relationship with my husband? He is my former spouse. I understand what you are thinking, Mom. You shouldn't even try it. Dad isn't interested in you. Nothing. Do you see what I mean? Tommy cut her off aggressively, phrasing it more like a command than a question. Julian continued his narration about Isaac and Fabian. Lydia had another piece of the puzzle fit together. That's why she found it easy. It was as simple as it could have been. She decided to unwind for a while. But deep inside, she yearned to be with Isaac again. Tommy knocked on Lydia's door and notified her of a visitor. Lydia went downstairs, shocked. In the corridor, there was a large man. Julian was taller than him. But this man was twice as wide. Gora turned around and greeted everyone. In a low ringing voice. "Hello, everyone. This is Fabian Small. Julian informs me that you did not receive a response to your job application." "Yes, exactly. Everyone was avoiding me like the plague. You should be avoided." "Yes, exactly. Your association with Peter Ramsgate exposes you to risk. That's why I wanted Isaacs to come out about it. He was conscious of his responsibilities. He was in charge of the evidence. That led to your detention. When Ramsdale discovered who had given the proof, that led to his eventual demise. He began threatening you and my future daughter-in-law. So we had to isolate you. Now I understand you're looking for work. Is this accurate?" "Yes, I was a certified public accountant. And paralegal until we were both jailed." "Paralegal accountant, good, good. I own and operate a firm that provides security services and systems. My firm and trust are both ex-convict investors. A financial expert is required. I am able to provide you a reasonable income. We are hiring you for a month. Following that, if you demonstrate your capability and compatibility with our personnel, you will be assigned a specific contract and provided with housing. It's free to rent. There is one requirement under the No. Are you going to contact Isaac? I'm your immediate manager. Can you agree? Do I really have no choice? I am in agreement without a doubt. You have a choice, refuse." Lydia was silent for a little period. She was taken aback by Isaac's lack of interest in her, despite the fact that he cared about her immediate needs. Fabian was asked about it. The solution is straightforward. This is what we strive to provide for all ex-prisoners. The sole exception is that Isaac will have nothing to do with you for obvious reasons. Lydia was stunned once more this time by the direct, even aggressive response. "I agreed to the demands," she murmured with a trembling voice. Fabian hadn't expected anything else, so he said, "Good. Julian will drop you off at our office tomorrow to sign contracts and go through the human resources process. We will arrange for you to hire a compact automobile. We have a garage available to supply employees with a quality car at a reasonable price. That's it for next month." With that, Fabian said farewell and walked away, leaving Lydia perplexed. She stood up and was ready to head back to her room, when she noticed the binoculars. She looked up and noticed that Fabian had just entered Isaac's house and was hailed by her ex-husband. She didn't have enough time to have a good look at Isaac, so she put the binoculars next to the window. She started making a list of needs for a new beginning in her life. Lydia noticed the sound of a car approaching on the street. When it was nearly dark, Tommy and Julian were out to supper, so they wouldn't be home for long. Looking out the window, she noticed that the car had come to a stop in front of Isaac's door. She saw Isaac exit the car and then saw a pregnant woman with light brown curly hair hugging her ex-husband. Sparks were visible between them even through the binoculars. She envied this woman and was simultaneously resentful, angry and lost. This should be her hubby at home. She took some time to realize what had happened. After all, she was the reason that woman was standing on the porch as well as the lantern's illumination. She is not herself and is hopeless. She settled onto a seat. Lydia understood she had made a terrible mistake. But there has to be a way to get back into Isaac's heart. Lydia sought to learn as much about Isaac as possible with only 2 weeks till Tommy's wedding. The binoculars assisted. She saw Isaac's face, graying hair, straight posture, and skinny figure. She could see him conversing with the youngster. "Isn't it Timothy?" She was unable to control herself, and felt the stab of envy once more. Isaac was so skilled with children that she tried to find out more about Isaac's pregnant mistress from Tommy but was repeatedly turned down. Tommy, Julia and Fabian all ignored her inquiries. Her questions were also not answered directly. Lydia was surprised to learn the day before Tommy's wedding that Isaac and Laura were also marrying. She couldn't turn down Tommy's wedding invitation, but the prospect of having to attend her ex-husband's wedding was a direct blow to her ego. Her heart was broken. Her aspirations of reconnecting with Isaac had vanished. That idiot was carrying Isaac's offspring. Why hadn't she considered that before? She felt like a complete fool. Lydia turned around and gave final directions to the movers who were transporting her possessions to the residence furnished by his ex-con. Isaac had granted Lydia permission to attend the wedding and after-party at his and Laura's house. There was dinner and then there was a band and dancing. The dinner was held in a welcoming setting. The cuisine was outstanding. Lydia was placed between 2 young men who animatedly talked music and theater with her. When the dance started, Lydia sat in a corner, disheartened by the festivities. She was amazed by how little alcohol was consumed. The traditional dances commenced, the wedding couple. The bride's father was present as was her mother. Julian was glancing at Isaac who nodded silently. Julian turned to face Lydia. "Ma'am, would you be so kind as to perform this dance for me?" I kindly inquired. Lydia Rose took Julian's hand and stepped out into the dance floor. She felt better as they danced. She enjoyed dancing but had not done so in years. Julian was also a skilled dancer. She watched Tommy and Laura talking to Isaac, who was nodding but appeared troubled. From the corner of her eye, the dance with Julian had concluded, and she was ready to retreat back into her corner, when she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned and stared up into Isaac's eyes. When she got closer she observed his eyes wrinkled, deep and sad as if they had experienced a lot of suffering. What is going on with him? She contemplated. It finally hit her. It's I. I am the one who caused him to be affected. I'm a total jerk. She suddenly found herself unable to understand herself. How could she regard herself in the mirror in a fit of rage? She had put this man through hell, and had the audacity to be envious that he had escaped the curse she had cast. She immediately lost all self-esteem and confidence, physically trembling at the notion of what she had done to this man. Then she noticed Isaac was putting out his hand, patiently waiting as her thoughts raced and assailed her. "I am sorry, but are you asking me?" she inquired in a tiny shy voice. Isaac asked Lydia, "Will you honor me by performing this dance?" Without saying anything else. Lydia sobbed as she held Isaac close. Soon after the dancing began, she regained her composure and whispered, choking back tears. "Isaac, I apologize for what I did to you. I'm sure you're angry with me now. I sincerely apologize." "Isaac, I can't give you your years back," Lydia responded. "I'm pleased you're sorry, but we're dancing because the 2 people I care about the most have requested me to show you some compassion. I did a little of what you did for me at one point. You sensed some of my pain. I quote a few lines from Ramsay. You'll give him the rules and have to deal with them or else. My soul was wounded by the subsequent betrayal. I loathed you till I met Laura. She filled the empty space with her love. And all affection for you vanished. We danced here as strangers with a common past. I will no longer see you because of our daughter. And soon to be grandchild. But it will take a long time. Before I can call you a friend. Mind you, I have 2 gatekeepers. Who will be monitoring you like hawks. With razor-sharp claws they will not be afraid to use. If you try to do anything they think is wrong for me. Let's have fun together now. Lydia nearly breathed the touch of the guy. She had once forgotten. She was a romantic. He had an unusual feeling. He had previously been a touch soft, the feel. His shoulders were bony and stiff. His gait and motions demonstrated strength and endurance. She reflected on how capable he had been. Between the covers and marveled at her own foolishness. She had finally paid for it. An extremely high and awful price. Rather than assisting her daughter. On the most beautiful day of her life. She was hardly accepted as a visitor. Her father's fiancé was in charge of her daughter's upbringing. They were so near. Lydia realized Julianne had asked her to dance. Which should have been as natural as breathing. However, Isaac's permission was required. And her daughter and his wife had to instruct Isaac to walk over his shadow. Depression descended on her. Like a sharply defined evening shadow in a ravine. Heralding a cold, long night. She shuddered as she clung to Isaac. The man she had betrayed and lost. She cried over everything she had let go of. Isaac witnessed the transformation. Of a proud and beautiful woman. Into one who was broken and insecure. He'd had enough of her. She had to fight for her right to return. He said quietly in her ear, just as he had done before. There are people who will help and support you. I've covered the basics. You are responsible for the remaining steps. The dance came to a close. Tommy approached her and said, I can see that this has been very emotional for you. Do you wish to stay the night? I don't believe I should drive right now. I don't want to lose my mom. Or should I have someone drive you home? Lydia accepted the offer to be driven to her new home. And Ben and Anna did so before they arrived. Anna turned around in her seat and looked at Lydia. She said, You are alone and friendless. You did wrong and you will pay for it for a long time. We all saw that tonight. You finally realized what you did to Isaac. Instead of putting up with the inconvenience. And dealing with the consequences. That was Isaac's goal. He completely destroyed Ramsdale. That man is in for a heck of a time in prison. And not in a good way. But Isaac is not about to deprive his daughter of a sane mother. That's why on Isaac's behalf, we're offering you counseling. It will help you understand why you went down the wrong path and deal with the consequences. All you have to do is think about it. And if you agree, tell Fabian. When Lydia arrived, she entered the dark house, took off her coat and sank down on the sofa there. In the darkness, she was released. She began to sob as all her emotions swept over her. Remorse and a deep sense of loss came to the forefront. And it was all her fault. Isaac had been hurt, but had moved on and found new happiness. Now it was up to her to try to do the same. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed this essay, please like it and subscribe. If you have not already done so. If you have a story to tell about your or another person's situation, please contact me.